have Anna Helwing, the Executive Director at Galerie Haas AG. She has over 20 years of experience at the forefront of the global art market. She successfully ran her own gallery in LA for many years and also worked for Hauser, Wirth, Presenhuber in Zurich, and Sprüth Magers in LA. She's wrote for tons of new papers, contributed to various exhibition catalogues and magazines. In 2018, she started leading the VIP relations team of Art Basel until earlier this year when she moved to her new role as Executive Director at the gallery. We are going to discuss making it in the art world, internship stories, being starstruck, having tea with Yoko Ono, and so much more. If you do enjoy this conversation, before we go, just a quick note to say that our mentoring program opens applications on the 22nd of March. It's for all living and non-binary people in the creative industries, aged 18 plus, and it can be accessed from anywhere in the world. More information will be on our website or our newsletter, so if you need to know more, go to eyelightnetworking.uk. And now, the word is with Anna Helwing. Anna, thank you so much for being here on the I Like Networking podcast and for also being one of our first mentors on the first pilot program.
Go ahead. Thank you for inviting me.
No, of course, thank you. Before we start, could you just tell us where is it that you're based, where you're from, and what do you do for work?
I'm based in Zurich. I'm originally from Switzerland, but from the eastern part of Switzerland originally, and I moved to Zurich in the early 90s. And currently, I work for Art Basel. I'm the VIP manager Europe and Americas, as well as VIP representative Switzerland.
Amazing. And Anna, we always ask everyone this question.
Sure.
What is the worst work experience you've ever had? This can be anything. Yes, it can be part of work, a job interview, whatever it is that you like to share.
Well, maybe worst is not the right word, but maybe I would use toughest. So when I moved to the United States and in 2000 and I started to work for this smaller gallery, Christopher Grimes, it was for me like coming from Switzerland and being exposed to this reality in the US. It was like a real wake up call. It was really tough. I was not used to this American reality coming from this well situated kind of island of Switzerland, well protected, all kinds of insurances, and then starting in the US with this reality of hardly any vacations. I mean, I had the first year I had no vacation, the second year one paid, one unpaid, no kind of social, like you have in Switzerland, kind of insurances, so health insurance and all that. So, and also being confronted with this traffic every single day. I almost had a mental breakdown at the beginning because it was just so challenging. So I think nothing after that or even before that was that challenging, just to get used to this new reality and getting ground under my feet again. That was probably, if you want to call it like the worst, not per se the gallery as such, not at all, but just the reality around it. That was really, really tough. So that was a challenge.
I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Well, obviously not great for you, but it's good to hear.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
are
I
like
learned
true
a
experiences.
lot. So,
So, how did you first decide, or when did you realize that you wanted to work in the art world?
well, it was not like an immediate decision. It was more like a process. So, I mean, where I grew up, again, in eastern part of Switzerland, back then in the 80s, there was no such thing as an art world. I didn't know that there was like an Andy Warhol or a gallery scene. I mean, I knew there was a Michelangelo or a Da Vinci, but that was it. And then I moved to the next big city as a teenager in St. Gallen. And first time I heard like there was such a thing as a gallery world or a contemporary art scene, that was because I went to school with Ivan Wirth and he showed me a few galleries back then. That was the first time I learned about galleries and contemporary art. But when after finished college, I first worked for UBS for half a year in the market research department, and then I realized, That's maybe not necessarily my thing. I even started to study economics, but after 3 months into it, I realized that's not necessarily what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I switched to art history and German literature and linguistics. And I was looking for a job then, just a side job to make some money. And I found one on the blackboard, and it happened to be for like a small young gallery here in Zurich. It was like in '93. It was Marc Janku. And I got the job. So I was exposed for the very first time to these young artists I did not know anything about, like Raymond Petitbon, Mark Diane, Patty Martori, Jeffrey Wallons, and also Mark Schonke introduced me to this whole Helter Skelter generation, which was that amazing exhibition by Paul Schimmel at MoCA at that time in '93, I think it was, and showing this LA art scene, Chris Burden, Paul McCarthy, Richard Jackson, Mike Kelly. And that was for me like a wake up call. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so interesting. And I got to work with young artists. I met them and I could exchange thoughts with them. And that was for me like, oh, this is what I want to do. So that's kind of when I sort of made the decision I want to go in this direction. However, I didn't know, is it like a museum world? Is it the gallery world? I just knew this is kind of like the people I want to be with. This is kind of like the content I care about. And so that's kind of when I made the decision I want to go in that direction.
That's interesting. I'm actually just reading a book about, culture in general, and that seems to be something that most people that work in the culture industry seem to care the most about. It's like the people you work with and who you're around, and I think
Yeah,
that's super important. I think in
absolutely.
every job, but especially ours.
Absolutely, because that was then eventually when I started economy. I mean, they were all great people, interesting people, but I just realized this is not necessarily how I want to spend the majority of my time with. So they just had different interests, and so that was really important to me, the people.
So, how did you get your first big break? Was that when you moved to the States? How did you get your, let's say, your foot on the door?
That was actually when I got my internship with Hans Ulrich Obrist at the Musée d'Art Moderne. I was still studying art history, and it was in my final phase, writing the final thesis. And I thought, oh, it would be good to do an internship to just see how it is, kind of to really be out there, and also to see how is it in a museum. So Hans Ulrich Obrist is from the same neighborhood, also the eastern part of Switzerland. So we kind of also we all knew each other more or less. So I reached out to him and asked him whether it would be possible to do an internship at the Musée d'Art Moderne. And he said, yeah, sure, come on. And so I moved to Paris and I worked for a year with him. I mean, for half a year at the musée, and then for half a year at the at the Ministère des Affaires étrangères. I got to work on two shows on the Nuit Blanche, how I met Olafur Eliasson or Aisha Lisa Aktila, and then also on Cities on the Move, where I met Virkrit, Termanisha. So it was a great opportunity also to meet these artists. And also Hans Ulrich is a very, very generous person in terms of like also getting you in touch with, putting you in connection with someone. And I mean, I remember the very first day I showed up at the museum. I remember that if it was yesterday, I stepped into his office to say hello. And the first thing he said, today I'm actually really super busy. So I have an appointment. I can't do it. Can you take over? You have to take Yoko Ono to Agnes B because I can't do it. I was like, oh my God, how can I do this? I didn't know anything. I was completely overwhelmed. And so I found myself in a cab with Yoko Ono and afterwards having coffee with the two ladies. And that was my very, very first working day. And he trusted me. He totally let me do this. And that was for me an amazing opportunity. Or another time also when I told him, oh, I want to go to New York. Who should I see? he basically copied a few pages out of his address book and told me, look, here are some addresses, write them, let them know you're going to come to New York, meet them. So I just wrote them and told them I'm going to come to New York, and I met Ronnie Horn, the Kabakovs, Nancy Spiro. It was amazing. I mean, it was such a generous thing. And for me, the first opportunity to really connect with artists, get to meet them, talk about the work. And so that was probably for me really kind of a great experience, also in terms of learning a lot, and also the first kind of networking possibility.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing. I don't even know where to go now. First of all, I didn't know you had worked with Hans at that moment, but also I'm like just shocked that Yoko Ono drinks coffee. I would imagine that she drank some really strange tea concoction or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe it was tea. So, I mean, I had a coffee, I remember that, but maybe they had a tea. But it was really, I was sitting there just mesmerized, like staring at them, how they were really, they had a very nice conversation. It was for maybe for an hour or something. And I was sitting there kind of totally shy and overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do and what to say. I probably was the most boring conversation partner at that time. So,
That's incredible. I have a friend who's also obsessed with Roddy Horn. So I
yeah.
don't know, just like, I don't know, you mentioned so many amazing names. That must have been just a great opportunity, I imagine. And how inspiring to be able to actually meet all these artists. I think that's the best way to network really in the industry
Absolutely.
because
Yeah, no, but that's kind of the most important thing, in this kind of art world, if you, in the gallery world or museum world, to meet artists, and talk to them, find out about what they like, what they do. So just to expand your horizon.
were you ever like shy about meeting them? Did you feel comfortable talking to them? Because I imagine you were younger at that time, but
Yeah,
was
yeah,
that
no.
okay for you?
No, I mean, I was extremely kind of intimidated and shy, and because I mean, I came from like an art historical background, and my professor was into German painting, 19th and 20th century. So German expressionism, that was his kind of Paul Klee, that was his kind of stick. So I did not, I mean, I knew a little bit, obviously, from my experience at Marc Jancoult about contemporary art, but I mean, I was so young, I did not. And again, it was a different time at that time. It was in the 90s, and you didn't have like internet at that time. And only later in the late 90s, then finally internet. But before, when I started out, there was no such thing. I mean, there was a fax machine, and all you had were catalogs. So all you could do was go to the libraries, check out catalogs, and see shows, and maybe travel. But even traveling was not so easy as it is, or I mean, not right now, but as it was a couple of maybe last year even. So that was it was a different time, and so nowadays you can look up anything, you can familiarize yourself with so many positions, but at that time my knowledge was not as deep and profound as it is these days, or what you have today to kind of familiarize yourself with content. So I was extremely shy, and I mean, even then, when I assisted Hans Ulrich, I was probably a complete nerd, and I not knowing what I was kind of doing at that time.
That's amazing. Is there one kind of encounter with any artist that you think, wow, that really, it's like, I don't know, like solidified my love for the art, or was that really inspiring?
I mean, it was whether it was back then at Marc Jancoult, or even then when I worked on the Nuit Blanche, and I was going around in Paris with Olafur Eliasson for his sculpture, which was like a pool filled with eyes, and we were trying. It was sometime like in the spring or so when this happened. No, that's not true. It was like in the winter, but still, we were trying to find huge ice blocks, and we just were not able to kind of locate it. So we were just walking around in Paris, and it was so much fun to kind of like do this, as it was not a job for me. It was more like really fun time, and I didn't consider it as a duty or something. It was just, yeah, very, very inspiring. And that was for me also something like, oh, this is how I want to work. It's not just something you do because you have to, and it's kind of routine, but every day was different and you had different things to solve. And it was very inspiring.
That's so cool. I mean, I'm so jealous, but good jealous, obviously. So, Anna, just to fast forward a little bit, I'm interested to understand how you ended up in the States then, because it seems like you could have done a really great, you know, career European based, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. But when love happens, I mean, I met this man here in Switzerland, and he was from California. And so there was the decision: he comes to Switzerland or I go to LA. And it was at a time that was in '99. So LA was not what it is these days. It was still this kind of weirdo place where a bunch of artists were kind of like, it was still kind of the Wild West. So it was not commercial at all. It was just really an artist town. So, and there were so many people, kind of, not many, but a few, like Urs Fischer was one of them. He was already based in LA, and he told me about LA would be so cool that I thought, like, maybe I should check this out. Maybe this is a great place. So eventually I thought, like, why not moving to LA? This would basically be the time to go there. And it was just such an not an obvious choice, but I thought that I have to do this. So I moved to LA, and it was more like a coincidence. It was not like a decision that kind of I had or I made. Oh, I want to go there because this is the place to be. It was a pure coincidence that I followed this man to LA. And at the beginning, I mean, I thought, like, oh, let's maybe try something else than the gallery world, because again, LA was not what it is these days. There were only very, very few galleries. I mean, there was Sean Regan, there was Blum and Poe was a tiny little gallery based in Santa Monica in a small space. There was Margot Levin. She closed in the meantime, and of course Gagosian, but and then some smaller ones like Mark Fox or Acme. So, but it was not the same. So I thought, like, oh, maybe I should try something else. And I wanted to try communications, but I couldn't land a job because my English wasn't good enough. So eventually, I decided to look for a job at a gallery, and that's eventually how I found that job at Christopher Grimes, which was not like a major player, but then at the same time, it was an amazing opportunity just to learn the ropes, to learn kind of like who are the shippers, how does it work here in California or in Los Angeles. So it gave me a great opportunity to get my feet on the ground. And I still, at that point, I did not think about, I've never thought about opening my own gallery. It was more like something that it happened. Because at some point, a good friend of mine, Frank Escher, an architect from Escher Gunevardena, he told me that Blum and Poe are opening a new space, that they would be moving to Culver City, which was an absolute a no area at that time. So industrial, and it was south of the 10 freeway where no one would go. And at that time, I was already like, maybe kind of what could I do? And then, so that happened with that space. And so it became clear, oh, why not? Let's give it a try. And so I actually got that space. It was an old mirror and glass factory. It took a lot of imagination to see a space in there, but eventually I got the lease, and also sort of unexpectedly, because the landlord told me, oh, he doesn't know when it's going to be available, so he would have to play it by ear. And all of a sudden, it was, I think, in 2000 and was it three exactly, in 2003 March, right after the Armory, he called me up and he said, like, oh, you can have the space beginning of May. And I was overwhelmed. I said, oh my God, I don't even have a program yet. I didn't expect it to happen so fast. So I had to go out and find artists to start the gallery with. So it kind of like happened. because there were not that many opportunities and to work for a gallery. So that's why I eventually decided, okay, let's give it a try. It was also an amazing time. So the early 2000s, there were all these young artists coming out of school because, again, Paul McCarthy, Mike Kelly, Chris Burden, they were all teaching at the various art schools. It was also, that's why there were so many artists. There were all these amazing art schools, UCLA, CalArts, Art Center, drawing a lot of like people to, or young artists to LA who eventually would stick to LA. There was this new generation of artists, and they all couldn't find a gallery because there were only that many. And there was real need for a new generation of gallerists. So in 2000, July 2003, I opened the gallery with a group show, and in the same year, also David Kordansky opened, Daniel Hoog opened his gallery, and later, I think in October or so, Javier Perez. So it was the year of some young new galleries in LA. And that's kind of how it started, with the gallery. It was more kind of like a process than like a conscious decision. Now I'm gonna open a gallery. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, I assume your English was a bit better by then when you opened your
By
gallery.
now it's much better, yeah. But and also back then it was better. But also at the beginning, again, when I moved in 2000, when I moved to LA, it was hard because even English, it wasn't that good, and especially when you realize the moment you realize you speak a language well is when you understand the humor. And I was always too late to catch the jokes because I did not understand also to a certain extent the cultural references. So I was always way too late. And by the time I understood the joke, they were already on to the next. So it was to learn English to understand the culture, and so that took some time. But probably by 2003, I was already much better.
That's incredible. So, what are the like biggest learnings you have from that period? Because I imagine it was a fast learning curve whenever you open your own thing, right? It's
Yeah.
huge, and you did that in a completely different environment where you maybe you knew some people, but it wasn't like your hood, let's say it. So, what are the things that really stuck with you from that time?
Well, again, it was a very different scene, and even in terms of the art world landscape as we know it today, it was different. I mean, again, Art Basel Miami Beach didn't take place in 2001, only in 2002. So Freeze also launched around that time. So everything was on the move. Things changed rapidly. And what I learned during that time, having my gallery, to be super flexible, to also be kind of international. So because you could not, I mean, of course, it would have been a choice just to stick to Los Angeles, but that was too small at that time. But you had to reach out, you had to go international, you had to be on the move, you had to travel, and constantly being on top of things, so that you cannot wait and just hang in there. That was really something I learned then, to be always on the go, to never kind of sit down and just take a rest, but always keep learning, be on the move, be interested, and also in terms of like business, so that you have to make wise decisions, because I mean, again, with all these art fairs and being international financially, it definitely had consequences. So you had to be savvy about money, finances, all those aspects, like running a company. So those were my learnings. That's what's really stuck to me, kind of being first a student, doing internships at a museum, but then being faced with this reality of running a company. that was definitely and on the verge of this kind of globalization, also with like the internet, everything. So that was definitely what stuck with me and what I'm super grateful for, because I learned a lot during those years.
Yes, and I imagine that one, your finance management like degree came in handy at this time,
Yeah.
but also that all of those things seems to be skills that you probably need to apply right now on your job at Art Basel.
Yeah, it always comes handy no matter what. I think nowadays, again, everything, especially with corona situation, things have changed, that the landscape is very different, and you have to be very savvy also in terms of, I mean, even before COVID, that in terms of doing art fairs, shows, exhibitions, shipping, all this, you have to be very clear about what you want and how you want to do it, because otherwise, yeah, money goes really fast.
Yes,
So,
sadly, it does.
yeah.
So then, did you move back to Europe only when you got the move to Art Basel, or did you move back
No,
after a
I've
while?
been a little bit of like a nomad. First time I moved back, that was in 2009 to Switzerland, because I had closed the galleries for personal reasons. I had my daughter at that time, and then again, I mean, 2000, the second half of 2000 was a lot about traveling, like doing fairs all over the world, and so. And LA, no matter what, I mean, even if air flights have gotten much cheaper, but still, it's an 11-hour flight from Zurich to LA, or even to New York. It's like a 5-hour flight. So wherever you would go, you would be gone for a couple of days. So, and with having a small child at home, and being then on my own, having broken up with my partner, if it was just too much, and so I decided to take it a little slower, because it was also, the gallery took off so much that in 2008 I did a statement in Art Basel. Things were really going well, but then I had these two things. On one hand, the gallery that went really well, and then I had a child, and I decided for the child, and I decided to close the gallery, because I just couldn't do it both. It was too much. Maybe it would have been different if I had been in Switzerland, where things are closer, but being based in LA, it was just too far away from everything. And so I did not want my daughter to grow up without me. So I made a personal decision and moved back. And that's when I started then to work for Hauser and Wirth.
That's incredible. You have lots of big names on your CV.
Yep. Yeah.
But
Yeah. So looking at it, yes.
yes, I know. I obviously, that's why I like to talk to people about their work journeys, because when you're living in it, nothing seems clear, right? All of our careers can be quite, squiggly in
Yeah.
a way. So I think it's very useful to have conversations with people like you that have so much experience, to see that, it wasn't like a target, like straight line, and everything worked perfectly. And, you know,
Yeah.
especially as women, if you decide to become a mother and have a family, that all comes into play
Yeah.
quite substantially into how it impacts your career, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was always, I mean, my daughter was always important to me. And eventually, I would make a decision that would favor her, whatever it was, because that was worth to me more than anything else.
Yes, I'm so glad you're sharing this. It's super important. As you know, we did have some, moms as well in the I like networking community, and I think a lot of them struggle to balance both things, especially as if you work, depending on where you work, the arts world, your salary is not high enough to keep with, like, having help and so on. So it can be something difficult, and of course it is very demanding.
Yeah,
It's not a job usually that it's like a 9 to 5 thing, right? So it
exactly.
can be.
Exactly. It's a
So
job that, I mean, that's on one hand exactly what I guess everyone working in this field loves, because it is not really a job. It's more like a lifestyle. It's your passion. And so a lot happens. yeah, not during 9 to 5, but on weekends, in the evening, when you meet your clients, the customer, the collectors, for like a dinner, because then they have time to really discuss something, because they have to work during the day as well. So it's this kind of like gray zone, and eventually, very quickly, can turn into a 24/7 job.
Do you have any advice or tips on how you dealt with that at the time, or did you just, or was it not that clear
It was at
while
that
you were doing it?
time, it wasn't that clear, because also it was a time of a lot of like changes and developments. I mean, during my 5.5 years at Hauser and Wirth, there so much happened. I mean, all these different locations and galleries were opened. So therefore, it was always things to do and an amazing things, again, because it was not necessarily like a job. It was also something I really loved to do. Of course, you wanted to go to see that show, to be at the biennial and see the presentation of that artist, because you also felt personally responsible, because I worked with certain artists at the gallery, and so I was also to a certain extent responsible for the presentation. So you wanted to see it, you wanted to be part of it and celebrate the moment with the artist. So at that time, I was traveling a lot and was gone a lot. So, but then also at some point, I just had to also realize, oh, now it's getting a little too much. But it's really difficult to hold back, especially when you see all these great things happening and you're interested in, and it's not necessarily that you have to, but that you want to. Yeah, to sit down and look at things carefully and make the decision. Sometimes, yeah, but I would really recommend to anyone to do that, because also you can easily burn yourself in terms of your energies. And again, if you have a child, you can't see your child as often as you would like to. So, but to take the time, sit back and evaluate, what's really important to you, that is, I think, essential.
That's great advice, and I thank you so much for sharing that. So you went to Art Basel in 2018, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And so, what are the things you love the most about your current role? Because you've been in galleries for so long, and
Yep.
then now you're working for art fair, you're
hmm
managing VIP relations worldwide. And so, what is one thing that you were really attracted to?
I mean, again, since 2018, the world has changed again. So, I mean, at the beginning, when we still could, obviously, when we had the fairs, the physical fairs, I mean, art fairs have always been part of my life, just on the other side, like working for galleries, working on the booth. But now, then it was on the other side, kind of not as like setting up the fair, but again in VIP relations, the contact to people and being in touch with them at the fair itself, to these programs. We have like the weekend program introducing young collectors, not only age-wise, but also collectors at the beginning of collecting, to galleries, and fostering new relationships and introducing them to this world. So this kind of maybe educational aspect too. So I really like that a lot. And now, I mean, obviously with Corona, things have slightly changed. Unfortunately, we can't have the fairs, so it has turned more digital. And what I really like now to do, I know it doesn't replace the actual art fair, but still, it's as close as we can get, these virtual walkthroughs. And we organize these virtual walkthroughs, each VIP representative, and there are 25 altogether, more or less, from all over the world. They're hosting these walkthroughs. Some of them are by invitation only, the others are open, not necessarily to the publics, but to the VIPs. And we take them through the galleries via Zoom. So we invite also gallerists to these tours, and they can talk about the works they present. during the online viewing rooms. And it's like 5 or 6 galleries in 1 hour. And so they're usually, I don't know, maybe like 50 or even more participants. And so they get to see all the works we choose during the OVR. And that I actually really like to do. I've also done some of them, and I will also do one for Miami Beach. And so I will do it, or I've done it also with a collector, and this person has chosen certain galleries or artists. So it's a great way of learning things, seeing things which you otherwise maybe not necessarily would do, you know?
Absolutely. So, Anna, I'm curious to know what is something that you spend a lot of time doing now at your job that you didn't anticipate you would, or if that's not, if you knew exactly what you're getting yourself into.
Well, I mean, right now it's also learning a lot, kind of in terms of programs and apps. So, again, in the 90s, we didn't have this kind of thing. And right now, and it's super interesting to learn about new programs for, whether it's project management programs or also to work better as in a team. So that's kind of originally, I mean, where I came from sales at galleries, that was not necessarily the case. But as a big company like Art Basel, this is great. And I love to discover new programs. And I think that's also very important to anyone trying to break into this field, to know about these programs, because also galleries have to get more efficient these days and work well together. So that's also something I would recommend anyone, to familiarize yourself with all kinds of programs out there that help to work more efficiently together.
I love that. That's amazing advice.
Yep.
So, and as since we're going on advice now, and we're almost close to our time with you,
Yep.
you've clearly been, taught how to network in a different time with Zurich, and then you've done your share of networking again when it came to moving to a new country, and now back at Art Basel. So, what is your one or two, however you may want to give us, best networking tip?
I mean, of course, it's always important to go out and be present, see shows, talk to people, and I mean, you can't right now. It's difficult to do that for obvious reasons, but still, as much as you can, go out, do it, talk to people. But first, think about what you want to do. I mean, have a plan, have an idea of what it is, what you want, and then approach people. Kind of, I guess, in the art world, everyone loves, because it's everyone's passion. So people love to talk about this content. But be clear about what you want, and who you want to meet, and just take the courage to do it. And also, again, because everything has gone digital, do the same thing, whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, have a presence, create your identity, who you are, who you want to be in touch with, think about it, and don't hesitate.
I love that, the don't hesitate part. That's really good.
Yeah.
So, Anna, thanks again so much for coming to share your amazing experience with us. I am in awe. It must have been an amazing time.
Yep.
And you're still doing so much. And I really hope that we get to see art fairs again in person next year,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mentioned this with someone else as well, who's an art consultant, who's one of our other mentors, how it's always a good moment where, and if everyone meets from all over the world, and we all miss it. It's obviously not the same, but we do what we can.
Yeah.
So, to keep everybody inspired, what are
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
three some of your three favorite artists, either at this moment or at all times, that people can go, Google and look at online?
Mhm. I mean, currently, my three favorite, I mean, I have more, but three I really like a lot right now. That's Diamond Stingley, Kari Upson. I've always liked her work, but still, but again, Kari Upson and Jessie Wine.
Amazing, Anna. I will leave all those links for
Yeah,
everyone to check out.
please
And
do so.
yes, and so, Anna, before we go, just leave us with the one advice that you would give your younger self.
Um, Passion and the love for art is, I guess, what really connects us in this field. So never forget this. This should basically drive your all your efforts.
Oh my God, that's incredible. And thanks again so much for coming on the podcast, for being one of our amazing mentors, and for sharing so much of your time with us.
You're very
I look
welcome.
forward to seeing you soon on a live art fair, hopefully. But
Yes.
otherwise, I'm sure we'll meet. I don't know if you know this about me. I don't know if I told you this, but I am partly Swiss.
Ah,
Did you
you
know
are.
that?
Ah, no, I
Yes.
didn't
So
know. Oh,
yeah,
great.
my great grandmother is from Geneva, so I have
Okay.
Swiss citizenships. I used to go almost every year to see my great aunt, who was the most fabulous human being. She would not allow us to drink water at the table even when we were 7. She had tons of boyfriends, tons.
Oh, she sounds amazing. Must have
She
been
re-
fun around her.
she was a fun old lady, let's put it like that. So yeah, so my grandmother is very proudly Swiss and my grandfather is very proudly Polish. So my family is very confused as I tell people.
That's the reality nowadays. I guess everyone is from somewhere these days. So, I mean, I even myself, I'm not originally Swiss. I'm also my parents. My father was German, my mom Austrian. So I was born here. And so I'm not like several generations of like, Swiss roots. So I guess that's the reality for so many people these days.
Exactly. But yes, hopefully I'll be back in Switzerland at some time we can meet up.
Yeah,
Um,
let's hope we can travel soon again. So and meet each other in person,
yes, that would be
wherever it is. You're
amazing.
in Switzerland at our Basel or in London or I don't know.
Somewhere soon.
Yes, somewhere
Even,
soon.
yeah,
Exactly.
somewhere soon. Thanks again, Anna, so much. It was lovely to have you.
Thank you, Isabel, for the invitation. Lovely to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. As usual, please rate, review, and subscribe. Send it to a friend. That helps us a lot. Next week, we have Muriel Harper, sensitivity reader, editor, all around badass author, and she's going to talk to us on many things about the publishing industry. Quick note to say that if you have any more questions about what we do as I Like Networking, we have events, we have workshops, we have courses, we have a membership scheme, we have a mentoring program, and you can find information on all of that on our website, ilikенetworking.uk, or on Instagram, which is at ilikenetworking. We're also on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can find us all if you just type I Like Networking everywhere, basically. We are that original. I hope to see you again next week.